Hello and welcome to another episode of Spark Talk. Today joining me are Comrades Lital and Sandra, who are on the ground in Los Angeles, where there's been huge protests in response to Trump unleashing National Guard and Marine terror on immigrants. Welcome, comrades.
Thank you.
Okay, so in this episode, the main thing I want to achieve is a little bit of what just happened, what sparked this, but also where are things at right now, and most importantly, as always, what we try to do with this show is what to do about it, right? There's huge terror against immigrants. This is an attack, obviously, against the working class, how to fight back. So why don't we start by talking a little bit of what happened? Like LA blew up into flames. What triggered this?
Yeah, so we already knew that Trump's basis was an attack on immigrants, and LA seemed like the perfect city to do so. LA is like majority immigrant city, Mexican and Central American immigrants. And so this was pretty much the ground of where those attacks were going to take place. And we saw that, it's going to say June 6th was the first day of attacks where the ICE started its huge presence in Home Depots and just all over the streets where predominantly immigrant Latinos do their search for jobs as day laborers. So that really sparked a huge outburst by the community and activists to go to these sites and kind of fight back ICE. But again, this are the armed bodies of men of the state, which the activists and even the community were unarmed and not prepared to fight back. And so Trump really kind of unleashed this massive deployment of the Marines, the National Guard. And now to this day, it's been a week and a half and we still have sort of a militarized situation in downtown LA where the detention center is still fully military, and we still have ongoing protests that are becoming smaller. But it did start big in the tens of thousands, and today the community is still trying to fight back.
Yeah, I mean, LA, if you know some of the history of Los Angeles, it was really defined by the last 40 years of the liberal status quo, where really it transformed a lot, where it is now over 50% Mexican and Latino city as part of what's, the unraveling of the liberal world order. LA is really going to be ground zero of that. And on the other end, has been run by liberal Democrats for decades. And their main purpose is to, Karen Bass is a progressive mayor, quote progressive, whatever here. And Gavin Newsom is, trying to posture as, he's going to take on Trump. But for their part, they really just want to maintain, LA as a place of, super exploitation of undocumented labor, really. They want to maintain the status quo. And their main issue was that they had it under control, that the LAPD and Sheriff's Department were perfectly able to bash heads and, and stomp out the protests against ICE. And they didn't need, the National Guard. And so what you have happening now is it's the National Guard, but it's also just thousands and thousands of LAPD, riot forces of the LAPD. And basically every protest ends, in the last few days, with them basically, kettling people. I read today that they've arrested 531 people over the last week from the protests. Wow. And so it's just a massive repressive, again, this was really just sparked by very justified anger at these. I started with a raid at a apparel company in downtown, which was a workplace. Up until recently, there were raids, but it was kind of on a smaller scale. And this really was a real increase in the attacks on the community. So, but yeah, I think that's a real kind of thing people need to understand. As we say, La Raza built LA. This is really a struggle of the Mexican and Latino workforce and community against a war that's been waged by Trump, but also the Democratic Party here.
Right. I actually appreciate you putting that in context of like why LA, because that is a question I had. Why LA? Why did Trump go after LA specifically? So that helps to make sense of it. Now, obviously, I'm somebody speaking from outside of the United States, so I get a lot of this content from social media and news and so on. But my sense was that, a lot of people, especially younger people, they saw what was happening in terms of the protests against ICE as kind of a huge opportunity for like a, almost revolutionary opportunity. I was wondering, since you guys have been on the ground, what's your take of that?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of left groups here in LA, for instance, the RCA, Socialist Alternative, PSL. Left Voice is pretty small, but nevertheless, they do put out that in their statements or in their articles that this is all signs point to a gigantic revolutionary struggle opportunity. And while it may be true, the important thing that our statement puts forward is that you cannot unleash the power of labor when the labor bureaucracy is in collaboration with the Democratic Party of U.S. imperialism. So there is not going to be a real opportunity of class struggle when the labor movement does not even mobilize for themselves. So SEI is a large union here in LA. They did a protest to defend their union leader, which was arrested and now faces charges of federal conspiracy charges. But what they did at that demo is they totally demobilized that demonstration where thousands of youth and workers went to kind of protest this anti-ICE attack in our community. And what they did is just at 1 p.m. at the dot, where it was the rearrangement of David Huerta, they totally said, oh, the protest is over. Everyone go home. So this is kind of an opportunity to show and flex the power of labor, but it's not. And so what the left does is that they don't take on the bureaucracy. They don't expose how this is what they're doing on the ground, and it needs to be exposed to the working class and to the youth that you actually need to mobilize labor to cause this massive class struggle that the left talk about. And so there really isn't that massive revolutionary opportunity when you're not mobilizing the working class, and where at the demos you don't even have like labor contingents in defense of immigrants. So the situation is there, but it's very mired in liberalism and pro-democratic party politics.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that a little, I think like if you read a lot of like the RCA press or other leftist press, you get a picture like the working class is united in LA and they're all, together on the streets, fighting, but spontaneous protest isn't enough and we need, communist leadership or whatever, the vanguard but do work in the city or live in the city, you know very well that the working class is very divided in many different ways. Also, the question of, the Black population here, and that there's, that it's not really been present, at these demonstrations. And so we try to take, which is it's really the history of LA in this last 40 years, where there's just a very conscious thing from the ruling class Democratic Party to divide and pit Black workers against Latino immigrants, for jobs, for resources, for all of that. And so it's really, it's not a moral thing, that there has to be real arguments made, to, Black workers in the city and others, why it's actually in their interest to come out and defend immigrants. But that's just one example, where if you read other left's, literature, you would have no sense of that being, an issue in the city. And then like Sandra mentioned this, that the other groups really won't expose, the role that the labor leadership in the city, is tied by a million strings to the Democratic Party. But they also look to them to lead the struggle. They look to these, bureaucrats to be the ones, to lead the struggle in the streets, because they also don't fight for an alternative leadership in the unions. And so that's also like a big...
So de facto becomes a Democrats versus Trump struggle.
Yeah, which is how the Democrats are pushing it right now. That demo that happened, the No Kings demo, that was the whole thing behind that, this liberal patriotic thing. We're going to take back our country from Trump, and the Democrats wouldn't have done this. There was a sign at the demo that's been making a lot of the rounds. There was this woman had a sign, if Kamala won, we'd be at brunch.
Ew.
And so like a lot of people, because it just really captures like this Democratic Party liberalism that working people hate so much, because it's like, obviously the immigrant workers in LA serve the brunch. They don't eat the brunch. Okay. It gives you a sense of what the liberals are trying to do. And meanwhile, if you read like Voice's coverage of the No Kings protests, SALT, I mean, they're pretty enthusing. Like Left Voice is like, this is a progressive development, And so a lot of these groups, it's about, if you have millions in the streets, then that's like good enough. Liberal program is good enough for the movement, And I think that's like big part of our task, here is to really, combat like this like, bankrupt, return to the same liberal crap that got us in this position in the first place. Like a lot of the groups harken back to 2006 when there were these mass immigrant rights demo that were Democratic Party run. And what happened? Nothing. The reason so many immigrants are in this situation right now is because there was nothing, no immigration reform was given, nothing. So you have decades of huge millions of immigrant rights protests and nothing except for what's happening now, which is people are just super vulnerable. That's pretty much what the left has to offer, is a repeat of that. It's like, come on,
Right. Okay. You guys have said a lot. There's a number of things I want to pick up on, and you can address them in whichever order. But I think earlier, Sandra, you were saying the protest started out being kind of impressive and big, but you also spoke about the sense of fear amongst the immigrant community. I wondered if you can speak about the implications of that, of where is this kind of anti-ICE movement, the protest movement at right now. I think that's inseparable from the points you guys made about the working class. Labor is not being mobilized, not being organized, because the trade union leaders running the show, they're totally in cahoots with the Democrats. So why would they? So I guess what's my question? My question is, right, so LA blew up. Some people thought it was a revolutionary opportunity, but very clear it's kind of, still in the framework of Democratic Party politics. What's the state? What's the mood like right now? And what road forward? Because that's ultimately the main question, right? Like immigrants are at the forefront of the attacks by Trump. And there is a real urgent burning need to defend immigrants. Like, the immigrant question is totally inseparable from the question of the working class. So what to actually do to push this forward? So to summarize my two questions, where are we at right now in terms of the mood? Why is the movement kind of waning? And what to do to go forward?
Yeah, I think the mood right now of the whole city is fear. Some workplaces have like totally shut down or like temporarily closed, even around the downtown areas. Again, all of this labor is done by predominantly undocumented immigrant workers. If you see all of like downtown LA, it's like a lot of like and very industrial. Like you even have still like sweatshops, like the apparel, all of that is done by undocumented labor.
Really?
And so it is like a frontal attack on the city, because you kind of have like a ghost town that like people are not coming. I mean, I have a younger sister where she told me like the last days of school, like nobody showed up. And this is like, again, the children of immigrants, like, and ICE was showing up also to schools.
Yeah.
So
wow.
there was, I think, 2 cases where they did kind of deport 2 kids,
like
literally.
Elementary school.
Yeah, like 9-year-olds. So it is like a constant state of fear, demoralization, because the labor movement is not going out in defense. But why? Again, why? Because they're in cahoots with the very other wing of the ruling class, which is the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party does not represent the interest of the working class. In Sanctuary City was BS, and we are seeing it live. I mean, this is kind of a total illusion that people relied on, and we're just seeing it how it has not done absolutely anything to protect immigrants. And so what our statement says is organize the unorganized, is union organizing of all of this massive industry that is done by unorganized labor. If the union leaders were very serious about actually protecting immigrants, they would be doing drives to organize non-union workplaces. And then also like protecting those workplaces that are about to face raids. So, I mean, that's where our statement is kind of very concrete and also looks at what is going on in the real world, unlike the left that is like they're in a total different planet. What they do is kind of just pressure the bureaucrats to do something, but it is the same bureaucrats that even support Trump. You have Sean O'Brien and other bureaucrats. So
that's a Teamster head,
of Teamsters. But that is what it's going to take, is for us to put forward an opposition to the betrayal of the misleadership of the masses. And I think a very concrete way that we have is organizing the unorganized and full mobilization to stop Trump's attacks. And in the city, also the Democrats, which is Karen Bass and Newsom, that really are portraying themselves as fighting against Trump, which they're not.
I think that like we try, a lot of the left and everybody's like, shut it down, labor, general strike, everybody out, and like, of course that would be great if there was a general strike to shut it down. But honestly, if there was a labor contingent that organized to take a stand in some kind of action against the raids, that would be a start. That would be good.
So it's just we're so far from being at the state of a general strike because of the state of fear and division that exists amongst the LA working class.
And even from talking to people we know in the unions, while a lot of workers are affected, they also feel like they can't really do anything about it, and they should just kind of watch out for themselves and take care of themselves. So that is really a very dominant kind of consciousness. And I think that's also what people like. There's very like courageous kids out there really taking on very serious repression, but they need to be backed up by labor, which is organized and has a lot of power. And I think we try to give some concrete examples in our statement. Like Sandra mentioned SEIU Local 721, that's the county workers. In April, at the end of April, they went on a 2-day strike. I mean, this is a 60,000 strong union, heavily immigrant, and they went out on strike because they don't have a contract. And then it was just a 2-day limited strike, and they didn't get anything from that. Their leader, their president, was detained and is facing federal charges. That is a very concrete thing, and it's not hard to make those arguments to the membership on why they should go out, and connect their fight for a better contract and conditions to the defense of immigrants. And so like that's one very concrete thing that, that needs to be fought for. The other thing that's like really important that we point out is like which Sandra was talking about is just the question of, organizing and defending non-union work sites. So like construction in LA is an example. Construction is over 70% non-union in LA. And what that consists of is majority Latino, immigrant, and a lot of undocumented workers. And so what you have happening all over the city is you have like people won't, their rumors go around. People are afraid to show up to construction sites. Other people are afraid not to show up because then they need to make money, but there's been constant harassment raids of construction sites. So that would be a really concrete thing that the 30% of union construction could do is show up outside these non-union sites and defend, shut these places down and say nothing's going to get built in the city until you stop these raids. And then that would be a basis to unite the non-union and the union because, like I saw this statistic, all construction workers make way less than they did, like at least $5 less than they did in the 1970s. So when it was like majority union. So it's a very concerted by the ruling class to busted the construction unions, replace it with, immigrant undocumented labor, and then tell them that, well, you're better off without a union because you have more work hours and whatever. Meanwhile, everyone has been screwed by this. Everyone. And so I think that that's very important. And that's a very concrete thing that you could see that's possible to do right now, or local ILWU. Everyone wants to talk about ILWU,
that's
Local 10. Longshore. Yeah. Everyone talks about Local 10 and how their leadership did the Juneteenth stop thing. And that's what happened. But nobody wants to talk about Local 13, which is in LA, which is majority Latino and which has a much more conservative bureaucracy. But again, like when this stuff started a week and a half ago, stuff was, exploding in Paramount, where they were doing these raids and everyone came out on the streets. This is like a majority Latino working class neighborhood, and a lot of port workers live there. So that would be a very direct thing for the union, for Local 13 to have, come out, and that would have changed everything. That would have changed everything. And so I think that that's really like what we have to, what the left needs to do is try, like, enough words and, okay, blah, blah, blah. But how are we going to actually do something, to have an impact here in defending, the working class of LA and immigrants who are, who are under attack? Like, because it's a very serious situation happening right now, and that's like, I think the key thing. It's not that like, oh, nothing can ever happen. No, actually you can do this, but you have to deal with the reality of the situation, and I think that's the real difference between what we're putting forward and a lot of these other groups that are very fatuous about what's happening, but have no real way to actually impact the situation, in favor of our class.
Right. I mean, it sounds absolutely scary, how you're laying out the situation. But I think the thing that for me emerges as the clearest theme in like the several examples you just laid out is the huge obstacle that is a trade union bureaucracy. I know, Sandra, you've been, insisting on this throughout the discussion. And I wanted to kind of just touch on that. Okay, you got the labor leaders who are tied to the Democratic Party. You've got the working class, which is, heavily immigrant, Latino, etc., kind of afraid because this is a very real, concrete question and they're not really sure what to do. But I'm just wondering, like, is there any kind of force that's exerting pressure on the trade union leadership? Like, hey, what the hell? Let's go. Let's bring out labor. Because, this seems like, as you're laying this out, LA, this situation right now, is a very clear situation where, like, the working class and the immigrant question, like, it really is hand in hand,
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, are there any forces exerting this pressure on the trade union bureaucracy in any kind of deformed way, whether it's from the community, whether it's from segments of the working class or anything like that?
I mean, well, like what in the lead up to this, what happened in the last week and a half, there's been like a lot of community self-defense patrols, car patrols, different neighborhoods to be on watch for ICE. And while there's a lot of workers who are like part of it, teachers, others who are part of these patrols or community watch things, it's not as labor, it's as individuals. And I think what you've seen, this whole scale like attack that's been happening, you see that it's really insufficient. Like it cannot in itself. I mean, like if you follow some of their like social media pages, they'll report like ICE vehicle spotted here. And then, it's like in the last week, it was like 30, 40, 50 postings. It's not enough. It's not a real plan. And it's not like people don't think the working class, like it's LA. Everyone knows that this is the working class being targeted.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the understanding that the class, as a class can be like mobilized, to defend itself and to defend the oppressed is really not like a thing.
And I also think that these self-defense community groups also don't go to the working class because the unions, the leadership of the unions, is because they've seen they're not doing anything. They see them as irrelevant, and the but why? Why? So like you have the left in LA saying this is a massive protest, massive movement. It's time for labor to show up. But they don't say anything about the betrayals of the union bureaucracy. Like they leave it intact, furthering the illusions of the masses in the working class to it's just pressure politics that's going on. So that's kind of the key question is like, how do you really expose and like do like immigrant self-defense committees in the workplace that kind of connects the issues that are going on in the workplace tied to the immigrant question? The way you're being oppressed and divided in your union has everything to do with the immigration question. And this is your struggle too. I think that's the way forward, is to really build oppositional committees in the unions that really exposes these betrayals and really kind of imbues the working class with the necessity of that they have a material interest in defending immigrants. Like we say in our statement, the leadership of SEIU here, they're still working without a contract, and they had like a 1 or 2 day strike. But here's an opportunity: go on strike again until you meet your demands, and also fight for immigrants. While all of the membership of SEIU is predominantly of immigrant background, is like these are questions that are intertwined so closely. So, but the left is not doing that. So I think that is also the betrayal of the left. And we are the only group that really kind of puts this perspective forward of fighting in the unions.
At the No Kings protest, we had a sign at our table. I think it was like dump the liberals. You can't fight Trump, with liberals, and labor, Black Latino power must run LA. And this guy was like really like the sign, Latino guy. And so I start talking to him, and he's like he's active in the streets, and when I talk to him about labor, he's like, well, they're like part of the problem. And so I'm like, okay, what do you mean? And he's like, well, he does a lot of stuff in the ghettos and barrios, and there's all this homeless, there's a huge housing problem in LA. I mean, no one can afford to live here. And there's just massive homelessness everywhere. And he was saying that the sanitation workers who are union, like pretty strong union in the city, that they're complicit in the raids of the homeless.
What?
And I'm like, yeah, that's a problem. That's what we would fight, to like inside the union, to not, be complicit and to not take part in that. But I think the idea to him that you could have a fight inside the unions, for a different strategy in a different way was just really kind of like anathema. I was just like, that's not a thing. And I think that is a big thing that we have to, it's either the left, which, like, just to be clear here, is very small in LA. It's like very irrelevant in LA. And then you have a lot of community kind of street stuff organizing, which not wrongly doesn't like a lot of the left because of their association with liberalism for so long, and then you have the dominant liberal organizations and stuff like that. So, so the idea that you can actually like break, fight for an alternative leadership, and break from like this liberal stuff and, and actually mobilize the class, like unite it, in its defense right now, I think is seen as kind of not really real.
Right. To do with the years and years of betrayals by the union leaderships. I mean, what it's really bringing to mind is the fact that these betrayals, this is not just some, here go the Sparks again talking about betrayals of the blah, blah, blah. But it's like, well, this is going to have real implications because I was just reading, and we were just talking earlier, Trump, seeing how this is playing out, has just basically upped the ante, right? Trump said, well, he's going to go, send in more National Guard? What's the latest?
The last thing I saw, he was like, praising ICE and the National Guard, and that he was going to double down on the raids in LA, also New York, Chicago.
Exactly. So, I mean, the failure of labor to do anything right now. And by labor, I mean, it's really talking about the obstacles to labor being mobilized, right? It's the union leadership. Like their betrayals right now basically are literally paving the way for Trump to double down, which means more terror against immigrant communities, more terror against working class communities. And that's just like, I don't need to elaborate on how bad that is. When it comes to the left, kind of seeing this as a great historic opening in the fight against Trump, it's not so much, well, was it or was it not? But I think it's more, what were the politics at hand? And well, labor is playing absolutely no organized role. And that's really the way to actually build real defense on the job, mobilize against ICE, and so on.
I mean, I think like if, when people watch the like early footage of what was happening, there was a lot of really badass stuff that people were doing to defend themselves and, fight back. Like that was real, but it's like, there's also been like a huge wave of repression coming off of that. And there has been very little in the way of like united defense of the protesters, and also the left here, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, it's a Raza community group, Unión del Barrio. They got letters from, I think his name's Senator Hawley, basically threatening that they've been bankrolling the riots, whatever. And it was just like pure like harassment and intimidation. It wasn't a subpoena, but if you don't comply with it, they told them to basically preserve their records, financial records, internal discussions, since dating to November 5th. 2024.
Yeah, I saw the letter that the state sent to PSL, and it's absolutely terrifying because that could totally destroy their organization. And this is a huge attack against the left.
And it wasn't, I mean, I heard we went to a demo and I heard that a lot of other like groups have been getting them too. So I don't even know how many groups have gotten them. But they're really like intimidation tactics. I don't think that the senator has the power to tell people to not do X, Y, or Z thing. But it's really it's part of the whole like fear campaign to stop protest. And so that happened. And then they even went after like Churla, I think it stands for the Community Humane Immigration LA. Anyways, but they are like super Democratic Party, mainstream immigration rights group. I mean, after this happened, the leader of it did a press conference with Mayor Bass. So it's like it's very clear that anybody who wants to have any pretense of defending immigrants right now is an enemy. And then the other thing that just happened is that an activist of Centro CSO, which is another community defense group, was arrested by the FBI. His house was raided. He lives with his family. They were all put in cuffs and he was taken away, and he was just released like a day ago. And he was charged with conspiracy to disorderly conduct or something. It's one of these bogus charges. But basically what he was doing was giving out masks, face masks to protect against tear gas and all this stuff that they were like lobbing at protesters. So anyway, so he's facing federal charges up to 5 years in prison for this bogus charge. And I've read that he's a Teamster. He was a Teamster shop steward. He's a Teamster. But no one's really talking about that. For sure, the Teamsters have not come out and said anything about his case or defending him. But that's another component, including Horta, the president of SEIU. He's also facing federal charges. Like, he was just standing there looking at a raid, like being witness, whatever. And they like brutally like assaulted him, arrested him, and have charged him with, and this is the leader of a major union, in California. But this is like what's happening, and you don't get a sense of that from like a lot of the rah-rah whatever. It's like these are very serious things happening. And what was really posed is really united front defense, in the city. And that's not really the way the left is here. In each group, everybody takes care of their own, each group to its own. And that's really not going to work. It's not going to cut it right now. And so that's another thing we're really pushing, trying to do what we can to help, try to build the necessary defense campaigns to beat back these bogus charges.
Absolutely.
I also think that is a fight to have with the left. Unite on the basis of united front actions. It's like there was a protest in defense of Alejandro, the Central CSO activist and the Teamster, but it was only the Central CSO group that attended in majority, and then we sent our comrades. But it was very tiny protest outside of the detention center where it was like 50 to 60 people.
Yeah,
and we do have a massive attack on the whole city, and then only 50 leftists show up in his defense. Where is the RCA? Where is SALT? Where is Left Voice? Where are all these groups? PSL is massive in LA. Like, where are they?
There was one guy who was very friendly to me at that demo who's PSL, but he wasn't. I just knew because I recognized him from social media.
Yeah.
So I asked him, but they didn't have any signs or any, but you wouldn't have known.
The point is they don't mobilize. It's
Exactly.
like a show, like we showed up, we showed face, but like
even
mobilize
for
your forces.
PSL. Like we were at the demo, the No Kings thing, and we had a sign, government hands off, PSL, Churla, and Uno del Barrio. And there was a guy with the PSL contingent, and he was like pointing at me. We came over to him. He was like, I appreciate this so much that you're defending us. But I think we were like the only people with a sign or anything. And every left group was there pretty much. So
don't get me started on the left's problems with doing United Front defense. It's like it's something that's been coming up a lot in our work, which is absolutely pathetic because this period, there is such a need for United Front defense work. Like there's a right-wing shift, like Trump, all these other countries going after the left, going after any kind of pro-Palestine forces, etc. But the left, it shoots itself in the own foot. I've ranted about this elsewhere, so I won't go into it more. I mean, I don't have any other questions other than let's see how the situation plays out. It's very clear from the way you guys have explained the situation on the ground that unless Labor comes out in full force, this only spells disaster for the city, for the Latinos, and so on. So let's see how the situation evolves, and I'm sure we'll follow up on this as well. But is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think that's correct. We have to see. It's really not easy to predict what's going to happen. It's kind of quieted down now, but I mean, this is going to be. I mean, I think it's going to be a hot summer. There's going to be a lot, but it's not like people are just going to stop resisting and fighting back. But it's really the question is labor going to come out as a force, to defend? That's really, I think,
the key question.
The key question here.
Okay.
We in our small capacity will do everything we can.
Yes, we will.
To try to make that happen.
Anybody who's interacted with us, they know how annoying and persistent we can be. So yeah, we'll be in your faces with the United Front defense and going on about the labor bureaucracy. All right. Okay, I will link the leaflet that we referred to. Again, it's called what's it called? La Raza built Los Angeles. All labor must beat back Trump. Sorry, I should have asked this at the outset for our US listeners. What is La Raza?
La Raza is a reference to, the large Mexican and immigrant community in basically Latin America. Like Raza is it's kind of this ethnic group in the U.S. that.
Mm-hmm. I think its origin might have come out of the Chicano movement, but I think given the demographic changes of mass immigration from not just Mexicans are still the majority. Let's get real here, and it's largely that's who associates as La Raza, but it also includes Central Americans and others. But yeah, it's a way of describing the population that is both most affected by what's going on right now, and that's also been rising up right now. And that, like we say, really was key to building everything in this city. So yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well, like I said, I'll link the leaflet in the show notes, and do follow Workers Vanguard on X, Workers Vanguard. Insta as well, in the same handle, for updates and other commentary on LA, but also in general what's happening in the US right now. Thank you very much, comrades, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye.